This week, the Government of Canada announced their 2023 Fall Economic Update. The update included a number of measures that are going to impact the finances of Canadians, and the document itself was over 140 pages long. So I went through it and I pulled out the 4 items that I believe could have the biggest impact on people who are either already retired or who are getting ready to retire. We're going to walk through those 4 items and I'm going to explain them in a clear and concise way. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Mark Walhout. I run an investment advisory and financial planning business called Walhout Financial. I help people with retirement, and I created this channel to share ideas and concepts that I'm using to help people every single day. If you want to get more videos like these, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the bell icon so you're alerted when new videos are posted. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to start with the first of the 4 measures that I think are going to have the biggest impact on people who are getting ready to retire. A lot of this fall economic update, it's also known as the mini budget. The budget's released in the spring. This is sort of like the mid-year review or update for the budget. The biggest measures had to do with housing. The government recognizes that there's a lot more that needs to be done to construct more high density and rental units in Canada. So a lot of low interest financing that's going to go to municipalities to get them or encourage them to construct more rental units. They're cracking down on short-term rentals in areas of the country where that practice is already prohibited. So a lot of this has to do with increasing supply of rental units and high-density housing. It's focused on the major cities, and I just sort of listed, I pulled from the document, the areas where they've already made announcements of municipalities that are going to be taking advantage of these programs to construct more housing units. So what does this mean for retirees? I think the biggest impact here is that it could potentially create more low cost or rental options for seniors or downsizing retirees. So downsizing is a strategy that a lot of people consider when they're getting ready for retirement. One of the problems is if you live in an area where there isn't a lot of high quality downsizable or housing that you can downsize to comfortably, that makes it an issue. So if the measures here, to the extent that they improve the supply and the availability of that type of housing for retirees, I think that this could be a positive impact. The one big condition to that, of course, is that I think that it's going to take a few years for this to unfold. Like a lot of this is being announced now, but getting housing developments off the ground, getting construction done can take several years. So I think it could be up to a decade before we see this really start to play out and make those options really readily more available at scale for retirees. But I think it could be a net positive on the whole for people who are getting ready to retire. So now we go to the second one. A lot of the document also spent time talking about junk fees. So I think the spirit of the document, and I think the government is recognizing this, is that people are feeling that crunch, the financial crunch. So there's things here and there in this document that are aimed at trying to make life more affordable for Canadians. There was a number of measures in the document that talked about anti-competitive behavior from large companies in Canada. But the thing that jumped out to me that could impact retirees in the short term is a crackdown on junk fees, so regulations that are aimed to reduce excessive fees, aimed particularly at airline travel, cellular phone, internet, and banking. So hopefully what this means is that we may see lower administrative fees on things like cellular phone bills, internet, airline flights, banking fees, anything that can help retirees or any Canadian right now actually that's feeling a cash crunch, I think is going to be a welcome change. So that was another thing that I pulled out that I think could impact retirees in the short term. The third one is removing the tax from psychotherapy and counseling. So, mental health struggles are a very serious concern, not just for people that are working, young people, but also seniors. The transition into retirement and living through retirement carries a lot of stress for people working through that change in their life. There's people in retirement that do experience loneliness, and that's a big concern. So to the extent that people have that challenge and are going to be seeking help, a removal of taxes on, or GST and HST on those services is going to be a welcome change. And I think that could be a big impact for people who need that help and maybe are holding back from getting it because of the cost. So hopefully this is helpful in that regard. The other thing that I highlight here is that most retirees, not most, but a lot of retirees don't have benefit plans that are going to help them pay or offset the cost of therapy and psychotherapy. So hopefully this measure helps people that need that help, give them that extra little boost so that they can go ahead and get the help that they need. And we'll close with a discussion on an update to the Underused Housing Tax. Now, you might be wondering, what does an Underused Housing Tax have to do with me if I'm getting ready to retire? So first, I'm going to talk about what it is and how it might impact you if you're getting ready to retire. So the Underused Housing Tax was introduced in 2022. And it was in response to an issue that the government saw coming up, that there were people that weren't Canadian who were owning houses in Canada that were sitting empty. They were owning them for investment purposes only. So the government wanted to put an annual tax on that situation to discourage the practice. We need more houses for Canadians. The trouble comes in the implementation of how the government is sort of asking people to file these returns and how these situations are being taxed. So you can own a house as an individual, as a sole individual, but you can also own a house inside of a corporation, inside of a partnership, and inside of a trust. So to cast a net to make sure that the government sort of captured all these different scenarios, they said, if you are a Canadian trustee, if you're a member of a partnership, if you hold a Canadian corporation and you own real estate in those scenarios, you need to file the return. You may not necessarily have a tax to pay, but you need to at least file the return so that we can sort of look under the covers, so to speak, and understand what's going on in that ownership situation. The scenario that people may be getting kind of trapped in this, and I have seen this in my practice, is parents who are helping their children buy a home by signing on to their mortgage. And in that scenario, a bank requires that a parent who's sort of going onto the mortgage with their child to help them qualify also needs to be on the deed, the title of the house. And typically it's a 1% legal ownership that they're on the property deed for. That scenario is actually what's deemed in the eyes of the law a resulting trust. So a trust occurs where property is owned legally, but it's being held for somebody else. In this case, the parent is on the property legally at 1%, but they don't have any beneficial ownership of that property. They're only holding it for the child. Technically, that's a trust. So it's created some confusion among people in that scenario. Should they be filing a underused housing tax return? Again, the scenario doesn't require them to pay the tax, but it just requires them to file the return to sort of explain what they're doing. And there was a lot of people in this scenario that were very confused as the deadline for this underused housing tax return came at the end of October. Now, at the last minute, the government said, nope, we're going to delay the filing for 2022 off till the spring of 2024. So it gave everybody some time to figure out what's going on. The fall economic update clarified that starting in 2023 going forward, if you're a Canadian trustee and the beneficiaries of that trust were all Canadians, there would not be a filing requirement. So in the scenario that I just described, where mom and dad are on the deed of the property for 1% to facilitate the approval of the mortgage for their children, 2023 onward, there is no filing requirement for the underused housing tax. The one issue, so that's a good thing. The one issue, though, is that there was no clarification around the requirements for the 2022 deadline. That's been pushed off to the spring of 2024 for filing. So all that to say, if you are in a situation where you have helped your child purchase a home by being on the deed at 1% so they could qualify for a mortgage, call your financial planner, call your tax accountant, or call the CRA directly and speak to their operator line and get an opinion from them, document it, document the rep ID of the person you're speaking with. Personally, what I've been recommending for clients is that if they're in that situation, speak to me, speak to their accountant as well, and then also speak to the CRA and document, what they're saying. You don't want to get on the wrong side of these types of tax compliance issues because there are fines that go along with non-compliance. And if you're non-compliant and that situation isn't resolved, then you might also face penalties for late filing fees, etc. So all in all, a welcome change or a welcome update in the fall economic statement from the government to sort of clarify that rule, but there is still some work to be done for the 2022 tax year, which hopefully they'll come up with some more clarification on over the next couple of months. So hopefully this has been helpful. So 4 items in the fall economic update that could impact you if you're getting ready to retire or you're already retired. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section. I've included a number of other resources in the comments section as well. I encourage you to check those out. And if we don't speak, have a fantastic week, and I'll speak with you soon. Take care.